Do not change the channel. Your hero has arrived. Hey everybody, so a lot of people have been asking for me to do a video on the Canadian federal election. And I guess it is about time to do it. I mean, there's only about 21 days left um, before the election actually happens. So I guess now's as good a time as any to talk about it. So before we get into it, maybe let's just talk a bit about the last couple of years. So the Canadian political scene has been pretty unstable since I think it's 2004 now. Maybe it was 2000. Yeah, because in 2004, Paul Martin ended, I think it was 12 to, I guess, 20 years of basically one party rule by the Liberal Party. Or maybe it was, whatever, it was a long period of time. Let's see, 2000, 97, 93. Okay, they had won 3 terms in office, so 12 years. And Paul Martin failed to win a majority government. And Americans probably don't know this just because the way your government works, there's always a majority. But a minority government is where no party is able to form a majority government on its own. No party outright wins the election. So there's a couple choices in this situation. One is to just hold another election, which often happens. Another is for the party to try to govern alone, and at that point it's kind of a caretaker government where they maintain control of the ministries and that kind of thing, but they're unable to really get any kind of legislative agenda passed. And then the third uh, thing that sometimes happens is there's either a coalition, and in the case of a coalition, a junior partner will get something. Normally, they'll get a certain number of cabinet ministers, that kind of thing. Often, the leader of the second largest party will become the become either the vice president or the deputy prime minister, etc. And then they'll get a bunch of other stuff. And then, kind of the third one is called supply and confidence, which is what they currently have in the UK, where it's not a formal coalition government, but a minority party agrees to support the government on any vote that. So in Westminster style, you have confidence and non-confidence issues. So on a on a confidence issue, if the government loses, then it starts an election. So that's a confidence motion. Then there's things called free votes or non-confidence issues, where if the government loses, it doesn't actually matter. It doesn't trigger an election. So supply and confidence is where the junior party, the coalition, isn't formally in coalition. Like they don't have any ministers or that kind of thing, but um, they will vote with them on confidence issues to keep them in power in exchange normally for some gives me that. So like in the case of the UK, the DUP or the Democratic Unionist Party, which is a right-wing, socially conservative British Unionist Party in Northern Ireland, is supporting the Conservative government in exchange for tons of gives me that for Northern Ireland. So why am I talking about all this? This will become clear later on in this. This isn't just me kind of rambling on. So Paul Martin won a minority government, and that kind of limped along for 2 whole years. He wasn't able to get any of his agenda done. There wasn't any obvious way for them to form a coalition government. There is a socialist party in Canada, but they didn't win enough seats to form a coalition government with the Liberals, even if they had wanted to. So, then we head into 2006, and the polls kind of change around a bit, and Stephen Harper succeeds in winning a minority government. And we kind of have a similar situation where things limp along for a couple of years. Harper's not really able to govern the country at all, and just kind of nothing happens. Then we reach 2008, where we have another minority government, this time where the conservatives have a much stronger pull, but still nothing really was resolved. So that kind of when the big change happened is the conservatives succeeded in getting a minority government. A majority government. It's the first time a conservative party has had a majority government in Canada since the election of 1993, when the Progressive Conservative Party basically ceased to exist. So the Conservatives had about 4 years to govern the country. So they made a number of things happen during that time period. Kind of a particularly interesting thing that happened was the Socialist Party, or we call them the New Democratic Party, actually rose to be the second largest party in the polls. They won the second most seats. The Liberals fell to third place, due largely to a collapse in Quebec. Um, the Bloc Québécois, which is the Quebec Nationalist Party, and the Liberals both collapsed in Quebec, and all the Quebec seats basically swung to the New Democratic Party. Now, I have a confession to make. The first vote I ever cast in a federal election was actually for the Liberal Party in this election. That was back in my university days, before I kind of became the man that I am now. So I'm sorry to say I did vote Liberal in that election. Uh, Anyways, so moving along, we head into 2015, the last election. So this is where we enter the shiny pony himself, Justin Trudeau. Now, Justin Trudeau is a massive tool. He is like I don't even know how to describe how much of a loser he is. Like he's kind of like Obama, but with far fewer accomplishments. Um, Justin Trudeau is just So his background, from what we understand, is he was a part-time substitute drama teacher and a ski instructor. He's the son of Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who is one of Canada's most successful prime ministers. I don't personally like Elliott Trudeau very much. I don't like the Charter of Rights and Freedoms or a lot of the other stuff he did. Also, I think that's when abortion laws were liberalized and mass immigration really started to take off under the Trudeau years. So I'm not a fan of his father, but he basically became leader of the party because he was the son of a former prime minister. And he is like a hardcore social justice warrior. Actually, you know what? Do you guys, I'm just going to ask the chat, do you guys want like some epic Trudeau cringe? Because I'll give you some epic Trudeau cringe if you want it. Okay. Let me find this. This is like... let's see here. I'm trying to find the clip. I think this is it. So let's... Okay, here we go. Here, I found it. All right.
A little heckling out here, so appreciate you coming.
Here we go.
I just want to know how your stance on ISIS is going to help Canadians in any way. I need to know how you're going to protect future Canadians, like my young daughter, and 10, 15, 20 years from now, when you're letting people in with an ideology that just does not conform to what we're doing here. So, I'd really like to know what your take on things.
Canada is refused to punish ISIS members who are returning to the country. I think maybe like 2 have been punished, but there's like hundreds, if not thousands of them, and the Trudeau government refuses to punish them or like condemn them or anything. the Conservatives actually passed a resolution which got unanimous support, I think, except for Justin Trudeau. That was like the Punished Returning ISIS Members Act.
Absolutely. No, I think that's gives me an opportunity to talk about first of all, the fact that one of the reasons Canada is successful as a country is because we have been open to people fleeing persecution, fleeing war zones, looking for a better life for themselves and their kids.
Wait a minute. Let's just go back and look at the question again.
This is going to help Canadians in any way. I need to know how you're going to protect future Canadians, like my young daughter, and 10, 15, 20 years from now, when you're letting people in with an ideology that just does not conform to what we're doing here. So, I'd really like to know what your take on things.
Absolutely. First of all, the fact that one of the reasons Canada is successful as a country is because we have been open to people fleeing persecution, fleeing war.
The poor members of ISIS who are returning to Canada, they're fleeing persecution by the Syrian government. And like a coalition of pretty much every civilized country on earth.
War zones, looking for a better life for themselves and their kids. That's been the story of this country from the time the first European settlers came to be received by Indigenous people. People were fleeing conflict, poverty, difficult situations, and came to Canada to build a better life for themselves. And successive waves of people have in every different time, and every different wave. And when we welcomed in waves of refugees, whether it was the Ismaili refugees in the early 70s, whether it was the Vietnamese boat people in the early 80s, whether it was people fleeing the devastation of the Second World War from Southern Europe in the 50s and 60s, the Italian communities, the Greek communities, the Portuguese communities, and others. Our country is...
Yes, you heard it. The guy asked about, like, ISIS fighters, and he's saying it's like the Italian and Greek immigrants. Now, the defense people had was that Justin just ignored the question and was just used the opportunity to lecture this dude, but...
So much the better for it. And there is a sense at one point that, okay, maybe now that's enough. Maybe we have just about all the diversity we can handle and we shouldn't have any more. Well, I can tell you, when Italian families settled in Montreal in the post-war years, they faced terrible discrimination and people who pushed back at them and said, no, you don't belong here, you don't speak English or French. Every wave of immigration has faced pushback because of how they dressed or how they sounded or what their belief was, what their religion was. And every wave of immigration has led to Canada being a better, stronger, more resilient, richer country.
By having members of ISIS. Okay, let's watch a couple more Trudeau cringe and then we'll get back to the story. This is him mansplaining to a woman.
Unfortunately, in Canada, our volunteering as a charitable religious organization is extremely
Why is this not playing?
difficult. Extremely. That's why, in actuality, we cannot do free volunteering to help our neighbors in need as we truly desire. So that's why we came here today to ask you to also look into the policies that religious charitable organizations have in our legislation so that it can also be changed, because maternal love is the love that's going to change the future of mankind. So we'd like you to look into
We
that.
would like to say people kind, not necessarily mankind, because it's more inclusive.
There we go, exactly. Yes, thank you.
We can all learn from each other.
What a cunt. So what that was a reference to, so one of the things Justin Trudeau did when he came to power was he made it so, I believe, okay, so a big thing in Canada is a lot of organizations get funding, like tax credits or direct government funding, to hire summer students. The idea is kids get some work experience, they make a little money, all that kind of thing. So I think he made it so they have to sign a document saying that they endorse abortion and like a bunch of other shit if they want government funding. So like the Catholic Church and a whole bunch of uh, like people, organizations, like every religious organization that's not completely paused, got kicked out. Justin Trudeau also banned. He said going forward, no member of the Liberal Party can be pro-life or for actual marriage and stuff like that. Meanwhile, Justin Trudeau calls himself a quote-unquote devout Catholic, and that his religion guides a lot of his policies. Like, there was a thing where he went to talk to Pope Francis, and he said, Pope Francis, I had a chance to lecture him on my religion. And I'm like, this is the only time I'm going to feel sorry for Pope Francis. No one, not even him, deserves to be lectured by this asshole. So, Trudeau was the mirror. He came to power. This was going to be the last election under which we had first past the post. It's been a dream of the left in Canada for decades to get rid of first past the post system and replace it with they want single issue. Sorry, there's audio issues. Let me just change. Votes wins. A lot of European countries use proportional, particularly something called the D'Hondt method, which we can talk about some other time. It's not important. But what the Liberals wanted to implement was ranked choice voting. So how ranked choice works is you write on your ballot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You list all the different parties in order of your choice. So what winds up happening is the lowest party gets eliminated, and those votes are reapportioned to other people's those people's second choice. And then this keeps happening until one candidate gets over 50% of the votes. Now the issue and why they were trying to do this is the Liberals, as ostensibly the centrist party, basically most conservative voters and most New Democratic voters and most Green voters would put the Liberals as their second choice. So because they do that, it basically means that all the minor left-wing parties would just exhaust, all the votes would just go to the Liberals, and the Conservatives would never be able to win another federal election. When it turned out, we'll get to that in a minute. I'm just doing some background. When it turned out that that wasn't going to happen, he cut and run. Let me see if I can find this. Justin Trudeau, electoral reform. I'm trying to find Justin Trudeau, when Justin Trudeau reneged on it, he said because if we go through with electoral reform, then then Kelly Leitch will have a party, and when Kelly Leitch has a party, that's why we can't have it. So he reneged on that. So that happened. And it's just kind of been a series of disasters. We had the India trip. Let me get some Justin Trudeau. And you might be wondering why I'm talking about Justin Trudeau, because this whole election is kind of a referendum on his time in office. So let's find some India cringe. Look at that cringe. Why is my internet so bad? I can't believe I'm saying this. I hope those kids aren't his. No, that's not it. Let me try to find the why is this not running properly? Okay, sorry everybody, just having some technical difficulties. Okay, here's some Justin Trudeau cringe. I'm just trying to find if... Come on, there's got to be some clips in this. Okay, here we go. Here's this fucking doofus. Look at this guy. Hopefully they'll show the dancing. But yeah, he got dressed up in like native garb. Look at him. He's such a massive fucking tool. When Andrew Scheer there, he just wore a suit. Like... I can't put the audio in or this will get taken down. Look at that fucking cringe right there. Look at that cringe. Oh. This was kind of like the beginning. This combined with the failure on electoral reform was kind of the beginning of the downward trend. Look at this cringe. Let's see, are they going to show the Bollywood dancing? Maybe they took the clip down. Oh, here we go. Anyway, so people gave him a lot of shit over the trip to India because it was a fucking mess. Yeah, so the trip to India was a mess. Then, of course, we had S&C Lavalin, which I've done another video on. I'm not going to go in. But basically, it turned out that Justin Trudeau bullied a Indigenous female cabinet minister into trying to give a company that is a top Liberal donor a break because it had committed a crime a couple years ago, and it was going to be sanctioned by the federal government. Okay, let me just take a step back and try to explain this. So this came out in January of this year. Justin Trudeau's popularity has been steadily decreasing. The other thing I guess to get to before that is there's the Keystone XL Kinder Morgan pipeline. So it's been a dream of Alberta to build a new pipeline to the west coast. The idea being this new pipeline would allow them to export their oil en masse to make China economy strong. To export the oil to China. And the deal had all been like worked out. Everything was done. The agreements were signed. The federal government had approved it. And there was a change in government in BC, and the Liberal Party, although in BC you have to keep in mind the Liberal Party is actually like a liberal/conservative party, but that's neither here nor there. So the Socialists came to power in coalition with the Green Party. So they tore up the Kinder Morgan pipeline. They tore it up. And the federal government just kind of dithered and didn't really do anything. And it just turned into a disaster. And Justin just kind of sat on his hands for a year. And he wound up nationalizing the Kinder Morgan pipeline. And a federal judge overturned it. Like, I think what happened was ultimately a federal judge overturned it because there was insufficient consultation with First Nations people in the affected areas. So this like multi-billion-dollar deal that had been signed for years was just kind of overturned at the last minute. And then Justin tried to bail it. But it just, all you need to know is it infuriated Western Canada. It really pissed people off. It pissed Quebec off because basically the issue with Justin Trudeau is he ran as kind of a far left candidate, but he doesn't really do things to please his base. He takes like compromises, but they're really bad compromises that come from a position of weakness, and not like, it doesn't look like a leader trying to be prudent, trying to be pragmatic. It looks like a guy who's fumbling around and has no idea what the hell he's doing. And that's kind of the impression that he gives off to most of the public. So that happened. So then SNC-Lavalin happened. So what wound up happening with SNC-Lavalin is there is this major company in Quebec. I think part of it is in Trudeau's riding, actually, that is very much dependent upon government contracts. So a couple of years ago, during one of the Libyan civil wars, they had bribed some Libyan officials as part of a process to get contracts. Now, I actually don't care about this. That's just the way these countries function. Libya is an exceptionally corrupt... Well, it doesn't have a government. It's like barely a real country at this point in time. So I don't really care about it. But a lot of people felt it was a big deal, and the company was sanctioned by the Canadian federal government. Now, the Canadian government has a rule where it cannot give contracts to a company that is under federal indictment. So they were going to lose it, and there's some other option that the Liberal Party specifically introduced, if memory serves, for this situation that was like a non-criminal penalty. So basically, he just bullied this indigenous woman from British Columbia, who was the Attorney General at the time, into trying to do this, into trying to revise it. And the whole thing was just a fucking shit show. Once again, it really showed Justin Trudeau for kind of the coward he was. Because I think there's two ways you can deal with scandals. There's the Trump way, and then there's I can't really think of another good example of it. So the first way to deal with a scandal is you come out swinging. As the Young Turks used to say, you go out and you hit people in the mouth, number one. You just come out and you just say, they're fucking liars, they're pieces of shit, none of this is true, they're full of nonsense. Like just that's one way. Just deny everything, insult the people, that kind of thing. The second way is to just come clean and face the music and go, look, guys, I fucked up. And either way would have been better. Trudeau could have just rode the thing out. He wound up waiving client attorney privilege and let Jody talk. He could have either just kicked Jody out of the party, not let her tell her side of the story and resolve things that way. Or he could have just said, look, I was really concerned about all those jobs being lost. I acted inappropriately. I'm sorry, the Canadian people deserve better. And I think either of those would have worked. But he's incompetent, so that didn't happen. And he lost, like, basically overnight, like a massive amount of popular support. And then things just kind of keep getting worse. Just more and more shit keeps coming out. Recently, we have the blackface scandal. Let me just... okay. Where it turns out that Justin Trudeau, on at least 3 circumstances wore blackface. Once to a Aladdin party. He dressed up as Aladdin at the private school he was working at. A second time, he dressed up as a black guy to do a song. So, and then we have a third time. There's probably more. So this was a photo from him dressed up as Aladdin. Let's see here. There's another picture. I mean, he looks like a fucking rapist in this too. Then we have this picture of him dressed up as a black guy for a song. And then there's a third video, but I'm sure there's others. This dude wears costumes all the time. I'd say Justin Trudeau was dressing up as his wife's father, but his kids clearly aren't. Jamal clearly isn't his kid's father. I actually kind of hope his wife cucked him. And I hate saying this, but I do kind of... I kind of wish it in this case. So, that recently happened, and that pissed a lot of people off. And so we're heading into the election. There's not much time left, and I don't really know like what's going to happen at this point. Because the Conservatives are actually ahead of the Liberals in the polls, but the way electoral math works in Canada, and we'll get into this, I'm sorry we had all the background and that took a while. The way the electoral math works in Canada, the Conservatives have to get a significantly larger percentage of the popular vote than the Liberals do. Now, the reason for this is there's only a couple parts of Canada that are really in play. So let's go down and let's look at does this have the subnational breakdown? Here we go. Where's the subnational? Okay, here we go. So, here we go. So at the moment, the latest poll aggregators have the Conservatives at 34, the Liberals at 34, a bit lower, the NDP at 19, and the Green Party at 10. I've seen the Green Party all over the place. I've seen the Green Party tied with the NDP at around 12 to 15. But the point is the NDP have collapsed even further since the last election. They got 19% last election. They're probably going to get significantly less than that. They're led by Jagmeet Singh, who's like an ultra dildo Sikh, but who's also just widely despised. So the NDP is probably going to lose their remaining seats, or most of the remaining seats. You also have a stronger than expected Green Party, which is going to further split the vote. The issue is neither of these parties is strong enough to really... neither of these parties are strong enough to... Veritas said that he changed his name to be more Sikh, and he started to pretend that he was devoutly Sikh or whatever. Because a core part of Sikhism is gay marriage. That's like in Guru Nanak's writings. So the point is neither the NDP nor the Greens are going to win many seats. So their percentage of the popular vote doesn't really matter. So what's going to happen is a lot of marginal NDP seats are probably going to flip to the Liberals. Also, the comparative weakness of these two parties means a lot of people who might have voted for these two parties will just wind up voting Liberal. Now let's look at kind of the electoral math of Canada. So in Canada, half of the country's population lives in Ontario and British Columbia. With like another, I guess like 30%, another 30% living in Quebec. Now, the Conservatives have the disadvantage of having a massive amount of support in Western Canada. They have over 50% in both Manitoba and Saskatchewan. The issue is, while that does make them look like they're going to get a larger percentage of the popular vote, they can only win so many seats in these provinces. So they'll probably win everything in those three provinces, but those aren't like anywhere close to a majority of the population. So they're just basically it's just kind of overkill. It's not an area where it really matters because they're going to win they're going to win that part of the country anyways. So that's kind of out. Quebec has never really been in play for the Tories since Brian Mulroney. So I don't realistically. Okay, here we go. Seat projections. So the Conservatives might pick up a couple seats in Quebec, but really it's not going to really happen. The NDP, here we go. This is a good projection. So the NDP is going to lose pretty much all of their remaining seats. The Greens might pick up a couple, but these parties are going to die out, and probably those ridings are going to flip to the Liberals. The Quebec Nationalist Party is also gaining. Quebec Nationalist voters are really weird because some of them are conservative and some of them are socialist. It really kind of varies. Quebec is a very strange place. But the Liberals, largely because Justin Trudeau is theoretically a francophone, are going to win most of Quebec. They also have a strong lead in Ontario because Doug Ford, and we can talk about this some other time. I might have done a video trashing Doug Ford. But Dougie fucked up big time, and he's destroyed the Conservative brand. So Ontarians hate the Federal Conservative Party now because they hate Doug Ford so much. So the Conservatives were actually ahead of the Liberals in Ontario for a long time, and now the Liberals have a huge lead. Once again, any marginal seats in Ontario are probably going to flip to the Liberals. So they're going to win the most seats in two of the provinces that matter. And even if the Conservatives manage to pull off a couple extra seats in BC, it's not going to make up for them winning in the two big provinces and winning most of Atlantic Canada. So the Conservatives are probably going to get a couple in Atlantic. They'll pick up a couple here. They might actually lose in Ontario. Let me see what the results were last time. Let me see here. Ontario. So while it looks like the Conservatives and Liberals are basically... Okay, here we go. So the Conservatives got 33 seats last time, so they might pick up one. Despite increasing their popular vote by a fair amount. Well, not the same percentage of the popular vote. Yeah, like I said, they already have basically all the seats in Alberta and Saskatchewan. They'll pick up some in Manitoba, but these provinces don't really matter that much. Ontario matters, Quebec matters, and BC matters. So the Conservatives will get a couple here, but it's not going to be enough. Pretty much, unless the Conservatives can pull out like 3 or 4 points above the Liberals, they're probably not going to be able to get a majority government. Well, it's unlikely the Conservatives will get a majority government under any circumstances. But even though they're technically in the lead, if we look at the odds at present, the Liberals have a 67% chance of winning the most seats. Fewer for Conservatives. There's a 50% chance the Liberals will get a majority, and another 25% chance that they'll win the most seats. The Conservatives don't have a very good odds of winning this election, and it looks like even despite the blackface, it hasn't significantly harmed the Liberals. If anything, it looks like the Liberals have gained since the blackface incident. So basically what I'm saying here is unless the NDP recovers or Justin Trudeau takes a hit, which he very well... I mean, like, there's so much shit in Justin Trudeau's past. like, I'm sure there's all kinds of Me Too stuff. He got Me Too'd a couple times. People will forgive this dude anything. Like, Justin Trudeau is literally like the most privileged guy possible. I mean, he's the son of a former prime minister who's wealthy, who's allegedly heterosexual, white, allegedly Catholic. I mean, he kind of ticks all of the boxes for what a privileged person would be. But people are okay with that because Justin Trudeau is cool and he's hip and that kind of thing. So this is kind of a referendum on Justin Trudeau. It's a referendum on whether or not Canadians are fed up with him and if they want his leadership to continue. Xander Scheer is kind of a non-entity at this point. No one knows who he is. No one really cares about him. It's more, are people going to accept or reject Justin Trudeau? And it looks like they're probably going to accept him at this point in time. And it's funny because my father is one of like the nicest guys you'll ever meet. He's a great man. I love my father dearly. He's always voted conservative, but he's very moderate. He calls himself like a red Tory, that kind of thing. But he hates Justin Trudeau. Like, he hates Justin Trudeau in a way I've never really seen him hate another politician. Because what happens in Canada is very often there'll be a incident, like someone dies or some famous person is like dying, or there's a fire and a bunch of kids die, and Justin Trudeau will fly there and cry in front of the cameras, and he'll make it about him, and he'll ruin the funeral, and he'll use the family as props. And it just really makes my father angry, and he just really hates Justin Trudeau, understandably, for that reason. But yeah, so he's probably going to win. So people have been asking me about Bernier. So Bernier came second place in the Conservative leadership race. Like a fraction of a percent. He was very, very close to beating Scheer. And yeah, he was very, very close to beating Scheer. But he lost. And he had some disagreements with the party. He was somewhat more against multiculturalism, and he somewhat wanted to reduce immigration. So he left, and he started his own party, the People's Party of Canada. Currently, it only holds one seat, which is his seat, and it probably won't win any. And really, all it's going to do is just kind of split the vote a little. It's not taking away as much of the Conservative vote as I kind of feared. Now, don't get me wrong. The Conservative Party sucks. I'm not going to pretend that they don't suck. They're pussies. They don't stand up for things. They're lame. But if I have a choice between a party that will punish members of ISIS who are coming back to Canada, and a party that will not punish members of ISIS that are coming back to Canada. Also, between a party that's generally speaking more pro-free speech, and a party that's extremely anti-free speech, then I'm going to go with the slightly more free speech party. It's just pragmatism. You can like it or dislike it. That's just kind of the way I feel about the matter. So I've already gone out and voted, actually. I went out and I voted Conservative a couple days ago. I had a good MP. They lost in the last election. They're rerunning. I hope that they can get their seat back, because they were really good for the community. Like, politics aside, they just were very active. They were very good at like lobbying for stuff for where I live. So that's kind of what's going on with the federal election, and we're heading into crunch time, and it's the question of whether or not Justin Trudeau will be able to fool people just one more time. And he probably will be able to, because this country is really, really stupid. So, yeah, that is a preview of the federal election. I might just if people want to ask questions maybe for a minute or two, I'll take a couple questions and then I'll maybe leave this at the end. Canadian Conservatives are like to the left of the I'd say they were to the left of Obama on social issues. I don't know. It depends how you define economics. I'd say they probably were to the left of the Democrats on social and economic issues. It's not the case anymore because if you look at the Democratic primaries, the Democrats are now to like the left of the Canadian Liberals. Because I've never heard Justin Trudeau advocate the level of open borders that Warbird's asking if he should vote for the People's Party. If the Conservatives don't have any actual chance of winning in your riding, or they're going to comfortably win, then I'd vote for the People's Party. I just want the shiny pony gone. I just want Justin Trudeau gone, so I'll hold my nose and I'll vote for the Tories just to get rid of him. So Justin Trudeau, I've never heard advocate the level of immigration and the level of open borders that the Democratic candidates are. He's advocated for more. He's done the thing about ISIS, but I've never seen him anything nearly as radical as what the Democratic candidates are proposing. And that should really scare the shit out of you people in the U.S. Just how far the party swung to the left in the last couple of years. It's really just gone completely insane. Is there still a lot of controversy about the carbon tax? Yes, because Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan, which are conservative-run provinces that are very much dependent upon fossil fuels, would suffer greatly under such a regime. Whereas, so they're very much obviously against the carbon tax. While at the same time, some of the more liberal provinces like Quebec are for the carbon tax. Ontario was for the carbon tax until Doug Ford came to power. Now it's very strongly against the carbon tax. So that's kind of a thing at the moment. So the carbon tax is a thing. I don't know how big of a thing you can really say it is at this point in time. I kind of view it as a bit of a settled issue. But, yeah. Doug Ford refuses to implement one. Whether or not the federal courts are eventually going to force him to do it, I can't really tell at this point in time. It's kind of a battle of wills between the two men. And Justin is a pussy, but he likes these kind of these policies. Okay, so Warbird says what we need is a mutually beneficial solution to the carbon tax thing. Not sure what that would be. Okay, so actually I do have a answer to this. So what British Columbia did, because British Columbia has a carbon tax. So British Columbia's carbon tax is revenue neutral. So what happens is British Columbia adjusts its carbon tax every year. Sorry, its income and business taxes based on how much money they raise through the carbon tax. So British Columbia actually has the lowest tax rates in Canada, I believe, at this point. Let me see here. So it's revenue neutral. So they don't actually, it doesn't actually cost the taxpayer anything more. Sorry, let me just take a step back and try to explain this for a second. Okay. So British Columbia has a tax on carbon emissions, And the money that is raised through that is used to lower income and small business taxes and corporate taxes. So the government isn't actually collecting any more money, but kind of where the money is being taken from has shifted. And it's actually made BC more competitive in a lot of ways, because it has made a lot of companies like to go there. A lot of companies want to head to BC because taxes are lower there, and the province is largely getting through the whole transitional period. So yeah, so BC has kind of found a solution to it, and it seems to be working pretty well. The Liberal Party of Ontario wanted a non-revenue neutral carbon tax. So the one that the Liberal Party wanted to put in here would have massively increased the price of like pretty much everything, while at the same time spending the money on just random shit. So yeah, I think if you're going to do a carbon tax, BC is probably the way to go. It's probably the most fair way of dealing with it. Okay, I'll just give it another minute or two if there's some other questions people wanted to ask me. And then we'll call it a stream. Apparently Jim's going to be later, so I don't want to compete with Jim. Do they have impeachment proceedings in Canada? No, the government, the prime minister has a seat in government, so if the government's defeated, then he loses his position and they hold a new election. So they don't have impeachment in Canada because there's no need to have impeachment procedures. Yes, you're welcome, Warbird. Happy to answer. Hopefully, I didn't like bumble and not make myself very clear. Okay, let's give it another minute and then we will move right along. So hopefully that kind of gets what people are. What is the government doing with marijuana tax revenue? I actually have no idea. I haven't really been following it. So that's not really a question I can answer other than to answer that I don't have an answer. If that makes sense. Which, I don't know, it might. Anyways, so I think that concludes our stream. I hope everybody learned something. I hope that satisfies those of you who wanted to hear some crazy Canadian politics. God bless everybody. Have a good week, and more content to come real soon. Good night, everybody.